going to go ahead and call the Scott County Board of Adjustments to order. That clock's a little bit slow. It is 5 o'clock, so there's a couple of housekeeping items that we got to go over. However, I'm going to go over the schedule first. We are going to make some schedule changes. The old application on Wood Lake Road is postponing, so we will mark that down that has been postponed. We're going to make some schedule changes. You folks that are here for La Costa Drive, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to look at me for a little while because we're going to move you guys to the end of the list. Just because you guys are all my troublemakers, so we're going to put you last. What I will tell you is we have folks standing out in the hallway that might be here for some other applications. It's going to be a little while. We're going to try to move those out of the way. If you can give your seats up for just a little while, step out in the conference rooms, wherever that may be, try to give these folks a seat. That would be phenomenal if you can do that. Before you go, we're going to swear everybody in that wants to speak tonight. All right, so if you're planning on speaking tonight, if you will stand, please. That is way too many. Half of you sit down. All right, go ahead.
Do you swear affirm the statement you make tonight with the truth to the best of your information and belief? I do. Thank you.
All right, so La Costa, if you folks could give up a couple of your seats for the other folks, if they need one, that would be great.
Where's the conference room? Down the hall?
Straight out. Straight across the hall.
Be sure.
Yes, we will come and get you when it's time, I promise. Yeah, promise. Well, maybe. It all depends on how this goes. All right.
I hear the door clicking, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, door locks. You're in here now. Turn off the lights, leave.
All right, somebody go lock those doors. All right. All right. The schedule changes we're going to make on this evening, 2025-08 will stay as A. 2025-09 will stay as B. Charlie, 2025-12 will move to C. 2025-10 will move to D, leaving 2025-11 as E. We are also going to move up on the other section. I'm going to move up the conditional use permit to first, so we can get that out of the way. S-2022-47.
That's first?
That's first. And then the election of officers can be dead last because I'm out. All right. We need to go ahead and go over the minutes if you've had a chance to look at those. I know there are a couple corrections to note. Garrett needs to be changed to Barrett, and January 2nd needs to be February 6th, I believe. Sorry, Rhett, I'll pick on you one last time. Oh, it's Charlie.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that.
You're closer, Charlie, to
After
Gary.
I've done, the 8,000 set of minutes in my time, that shows you what I was thinking about.
If you have read through those, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes from February 6th, for the changes.
Ms. Barrett makes the motion. Janet Holland seconds the motion. Tommy, you're a little slow on that one. Janet beat you to it. Any questions? All approved by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. All right, we're going to move under other A, the review of conditional use permit S-2022-47. Rhett, you want to go first or Holden?
Hey, board members, chairman for the last time. I'm going to start it off by saying I believe at this point we have a success on our hands. It's not so often that we get to come up here and tout code enforcement as being a success, but that's what we're going to do right here. Turf Masters Quality Landscapes was the recipient of a conditional use permit from this board several years ago. There's some issues with meeting the conditions of that permit. It was made very obvious by the community that shouldn't be tolerated, and this board made it very obvious that it wouldn't be tolerated. And so through formal actions, what we've done here, and in concert with the applicant, we've got now a conditional use that is meeting all of its conditions. They have frankly gone above and beyond in terms of some of the landscaping and adding additional plants above and beyond what was required by their development plan. And at this point, staff sees no issue with the development as it currently exists. Staff has not, since the implementation of all of the conditions and of the development plan, received word from any other neighbors related to any potential violations. And I believe that the applicant, or in this case actually, Mr. Franklin, is in good standing with this board. With that said, it's very important to understand that if, for some reason, conditions change, we're going to start this right back up. Staff reserves the right to do annual compliance reviews, as is in our code for all conditional use permits. And we intend to use that authority to make sure that we continue to get the right kind of, uses out of our conditional uses. And so with that, again, I would just like to point out that staff's recommendation is no further action at this time, understanding that Mr. Franklin is in total compliance with his development plan as well as the conditions of his permit. I'd love the opportunity to allow him to speak, but before I step away, if there's any questions.
I don't, do you? Anybody? No, sir?
Okay.
I'm going to ask before you come up, Mr. Franklin. I know some of the neighbors are here. I'm going to ask if they have any comments before you come up. Anybody that wants to speak on this application? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Rick Jordan, Robinson Lane, 280 Robinson. To be honest, my wife made me come here, she can't be here. Let's just get the honesty at first. No, on a serious note, we appreciate the efforts made. I think as everyone knows, the neighborhood had a lot of concerns, and we voiced those concerns through the proper authorities. We appreciate seeing something positive come out of this, so I don't think anybody hears positive comments very often. So we are giving those positive comments cautiously. We don't want to these things slip back to the way they were. Glad to hear it addressed, and if we fall back again. But I just want to say we appreciate the board, appreciate the efforts made. We want to be good neighbors. I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. We don't get that very much, but thank you.
I'm sure you don't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, your name again, please?
Rick Jordan?
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak on this application? Mr. Franklin? I'm just going to say one thing, and then I'm done. Thank you.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Yes.
And so keep it up.
Okay.
Work with your neighbors. I'm done. There's
Yep.
no need for you to stay here and do anything else. All right?
Understood.
Thank
You've
you
done
very
an
much.
excellent job
Thank you.
there. It looks very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. If you guys want to stay for all the rest of the punishment, you're welcome to, but we're moving on at this point, all right? So Holden, I think we consider that as a success, and we're good. All right.
Good.
Moving on, we'll go into the first application, S-2025-08, Ron Scover. Brett?
One item of note, just for the record, make sure your mics are on. So,
Yeah.
Podium feels tall tonight. I don't know why. I hope I don't stumble around, the PowerPoint too much with us moving the agenda along, so please be patient. But we'll start off the evening again at 100 Lighthouse Way. This is a variance application to reduce the northeast side yard setback of the property from 50 feet to 10 feet for the construction of a lean-to structure. It's just outside Ironworks Road. I believe it's Fisher's Mill area. A1 zone, 14 acres. At this time, our recommendation is denial of the application. This is the property in question here. A1 zone, of course. This is a plat of the subject property. Again, the variance request is kind of that little dog-eared corner up there, the northeast. There is, again, some karst activity area towards the center of the property that has been identified. You could probably see this cluster of structures again up in the northeast there. We'll zoom in a little bit more in a moment. That's the general area of where this applicant would like to locate the structure if permitted. And again, through some discussions with the applicant today, they came in, they had received their packet, and of course, the somewhat bad news of the recommendation of denial. So they wanted to sit down, talk some things through, let us know their perspective on the property and their wishes for now and the future through different applications they'd like to do. And we kind of examined some things again, topography of the area, notes on the plat, sinkhole designations, things of that nature. That red box there is kind of approximately where they'd like to locate the structure. It's probably a little further east than I've denoted there. I don't know that that tree line is as robust anymore. But as you can see, the center of the property, it is a considerable depression. It slopes more the further you move west. The applicant has cited the topography, the existence of the sinkhole, and current location of other structures and their usability as the reasoning for why they would like to place the structure where they've requested. However, the language as it pertains to the grading of variances is very strict and very strong. We refer to KRS 100-243. Essentially, before any variance is granted, the board must find that the granting of said variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare, will not alter the essential character of the general vicinity, will not cause a hazard or nuisance to the public, nor allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the regulations. And while you're in the process of making the findings, the board must consider whether the variance request arises from special circumstances that don't generally apply to land in a similar location or zone. The strict application of the provisions would, or regulations rather, excuse me, would deprive said applicant of reasonable use of their land or create unnecessary hardship. And also if the circumstances are a result of actions taken subsequent to the adoption of the ordinance regulations. And lastly, and sometimes most importantly, the board shall deny any request for a variance arising from circumstances as a result of the applicant's actions creating the hardship on themselves. Again, this is kind of a closer in view of approximately where they like to place the structure adjacent to others. The applicant is here. They can correct me if they like. At the time, I thought the sinkhole area was a little smaller, as you can see by my small blue dot, but as you all saw the plat before, it is very significant. However, honestly, it is considerable distance away from this area. Staff has found that there is considerable buildable area nearby and also elsewhere in the property. Sadly, KRS does not take into account that just because, your land is nice horse pasture, whatever, it doesn't mean it's not also buildable area that's more suitable to fit, the rule of the law or the zoning regulations. And so our general findings here are the project site is 14 acres in A1. A1 zones have 50-foot setback requirements for all structures from all property lines. Applicant states that the proposed 32 by 32 or so structure would be located about 10 feet from that northeast property line. The applicant has provided some justification and reasoning, to approach the satisfactions of KRS 243 as it stands. However, staff has found that justification, those statements, that reasoning doesn't fully satisfy it. Again, a lot of the stuff they're doing is they kind of choose to place it there. But all this is up to the board consideration as well. So staff also does not support essentially the expansion of non-conforming use. Again, some of the justification lies in that there are other structures, whether they be permanent or not. I believe they've got kind of a parking area over there for materials and vehicles and things. So kind of compounding this issue isn't necessarily the best idea. So staff is unable to support that as, with the standards as set forth by the ordinances. So again, all in all, we do recommend denial of the variance request. If the board were to choose to approve said variance, the conditions of approval are pretty standard. Essentially, follow all the rules, get a building permit before you do anything, come to us if anything changes. And the applicant is here to speak as well.
Any questions for Rhett? Rhett, can you go back to the topography, please?
Sure.
So what you're saying is like the rest of that is no worse than what we're saying, so this part up here is pretty consistent for other areas that are buildable.
That area in nearby is a little more terraced. What you're not really able to see in this overhead is a fence line as well that kind of cuts in and surrounds in that dog ear area that, encompasses some of these other structures and things, and a parking area as well. You can kind of barely see it there if they open the northeast corner. So again, the reasoning, and I'll let the applicant continue to speak to that, but just by the language of the law, being with this much acreage of land, it simply states that if you were to choose to build a structure, you have the freedom to do so within the limits of the regs.
Understood. All right, thanks, Rhett.
Yes.
Is the applicant somewhere? If you will come to the podium and state your name for us, please. Sure.
I might ask you to change this at some point.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Good evening. My name is Lori Foxcover, and we thank you for listening to our request. We'll try to make it as brief as possible. We recently moved here from the state of Michigan, and we thank Rhett for his time and all the work that the people did. But when I look at the law and the letter and the code, our request for the variance does not obviously adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare of anyone. As you can see up in that area, that is very much like in the corner of the property. The piece next to us is a driveway. It's actually a road called Sharp Lane. That's the driveway in and out, or one of the driveways in and out of Pineda Farm, which is a thoroughbred farm there. So there is already a structure there that was there when we bought the property in January of 2024. So that building was already there. there's already a driveway back there, you know, where the other people had tractors and manure spreaders and loaders and things like that. We just, you know, continued to use that like that, but we thought it's far better if we could build a structure there to actually take away from the unsightliness of tractor, manure spreader, trailers, other trailers built, you know, things like that. So that was one of the reasons that we wanted to be consistent and keep it in line with the structure that is already there. So, also, this isn't really gonna cause any kind of a nuisance. They did send out the letters to the neighbors of adjoining properties. No one has voiced any concerns. The piece at the back,
Would you like the bigger picture?
like that picture, that one piece at the back is actually owned by people whose property faces two other roads in our subdivision. The Lighthouse Way is one, and I don't actually know the name of the other road because we haven't lived there that long, but their property is like L-shaped, and it then narrows back right at that corner. So there might be 40 feet of property that belong to that neighbor, and then the other piece along this long side of Sharp Drive or Sharp Lane, that's Matthews. The rest in that picture, all the property to the west and to the south is ours. So it really isn't bothering or affecting any of those people at all. But, you know, and again, I'd say that none of the people that have adjoining property to us have voiced any concerns or complaints. But what we would like to do is try to maintain that aesthetic view that we have, not only for ourselves, but also for the people coming in off of Fisher's Mill. That's Fisher's Mill at the bottom. And then the front of our property goes all the way across the Lighthouse Way. So when you look at it, there are, you know, 6 equally sized pastures in there, 2 larger pastures over here near Fisher's Mill, and then the large sinkhole, which is unbuildable. So I heard Ms. Barrett say something about the topography of that area. Would we be able to build on there? No, we cannot build on there at all. And I believe that's probably why that was made into just one large pasture. There is a very small area up there just to the kind of the west of the building that is already there. But I think the building that's already there, you know, you'd basically have to move that structure in order to put something else in. And again, it wouldn't be 50 feet away from the fence line, okay, to do that. So again, we want to do it, you know, mostly for, in that area that we've requested. I know it's a variance, but it would actually continue to enhance the area of the neighborhood, you know, not only our property, but our community. The unusual circumstance, I guess, that would maybe support the variance being granted is the fact that that sinkhole isn't an area that can be put to use other than for pasture. It's just not usable there. All of those other pasture areas that you see all have automatic waters and water line already running to them. So we want to try to, again, keep that looking the way it is. The other black structure that you see in there is very small near the barn. There's currently a little, we call it a cottage. It has electricity, air conditioning, heat, but no water. We believe they had some people maybe living in there, and they housed some of their equipment before we bought the property. And there used to also be an outhouse out there because we had driven by the property years ago, so we thought maybe they had people living there. We would like to, as part of our long-term plan, is remove that small cottage and build a small 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home there for farm workers. So that, you know, when you think, well, they have this other area, maybe they could put their lean-to or garage or pole barn or building there. That won't work for part of our long-term plan. I did bring a picture of the house that we would like to build there, if anyone would care to see that. So, I mean, I think we believe that our request is both reasonable and feasible. I know it does ask for a variance of the rule, but when you look at the piece of land, we're not really like butting up to somebody else's house or butting up to somebody else's swimming pool or anything like that at all. It backs up to Matthews Road, and it backs up to a piece of landlocked property. At that point, I don't even think the length of the property or depth of the property there is even 50 feet. So We're not asking anybody to make a definite decision tonight. If you still have questions, doubts, reservations, we certainly invite you out to 100 Lighthouse Way to take a look before you make a final determination.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So the building up on the far right-hand side, the white building that's
Yes.
sitting there on that, where you're proposing to build, is that building staying or is it coming down?
That building is staying.
Okay.
Yes, and what our thought was with it is we wanted to keep the other structure exactly in line with it. Again, to be aesthetically in line with that, we want to keep it the same color also. That structure was there when we bought the farm, and I believe it is on like skids maybe, because I guess it isn't considered a permanent structure
Okay.
in there.
Yeah, and that's one of my questions is can it be moved? So the variance can be moved back some, 7.5 feet is close, right? So it's.
We're
tight.
not asking for 7.5.
10.
10.
Still, it's pretty close. That's out of our norm, what we normally
That,
do.
that structure is actually out a few more feet, Ron, would you say? Probably close to 20. We said 10, like worst-case scenario. It probably in actuality would be closer to 20, to stay in line with that. But again, that piece is also on an angle. So it might be 20 feet at this end of the building and 17 feet at that end. Because the building is on a bit of an angle there.
And I'm gonna ask a little bit of a crazy question, but understanding
No crazy
sinkhole-
questions.
So trust me, I can come up with it. Understanding sinkholes in the state of Kentucky are all over the place, but how do we know that's the actual sinkhole? Is there a geographical study that shows that sinkhole exists, it's non-buildable, or?
When we bought the farm, it wasn't disclosed to us by the property owner or their agent. It was our realtor who found out that that is deemed, a sinkhole and no building can ever be put on it. So I think somewhere in the legalese documents, that our realtor found before we purchased it, it is designated as a sinkhole.
Okay.
And I believe those are the words that our realtor used.
Yeah, there's a term for it, I just can't remember what
Rhett,
it is.
do you know?
Well, the plat that, when they came in today and expressed that to me, we sat down and looked through it and found some records that sinkhole has been evaluated and identified by
Okay.
an engineering study, as part of the plat that was done here. The extents of it and distances, the scale, I can't say for certain, but it's there.
Okay.
And identified as a buildable area.
Anybody else?
Well, go back to what about on the other side of the building toward the fence line? There's that little gap, there's like a whole little area.
Okay, you bring up a good question. Right there, where that building that's currently there is, it drops right off beside that building and starts to go down towards that. It's already the west side of that structure that's currently there is already secured with, like lumber ties, landscape ties there. 'Cause
Railroad ties.
it drops down probably, I'm gonna say 24 to 30 inches right from there.
What we're struggling with is
Uh-huh.
the topography map doesn't show that drastic of a change all the way through that. We've seen it a lot tighter when those scales get tighter, obviously it's a steeper drop off.
Uh-huh.
And that is not as steep as what we have seen before.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question?
Well, I guess my only input is going back to what Red's saying, there's 14 acres there, and I know she has other areas designated for other things, but there's still a choice of how you use your 14 acres. We have addressed this before, I think it was a pool situation. And it's like, what's your choice? Do you want a building or do you want a pool? So with 14 acres that are usable, there are options for her to make personal.
I would agree that there are options, but for us, I think in the community, it's the aesthetic value, how that will take away from, when you put a building on a property, you're hoping that it's going to increase the value, increase the appearance. If we just put it in one of these other areas, I think it's gonna do nothing but take away from the current value. It will take away from its value and its aesthetic value especially.
I don't think we disagree with that. The problem
Okay.
is the KRS statute disagrees with that.
Right.
Right, so when you begin to look at that statute, and I think Rhett described it as demonstrable hardship, I think was the word I wrote down. Does this cause a demonstrable hardship if you moved it somewhere else? And the answer is no.
No.
You know, so aesthetically, yes, I agree that it probably would look better there.
Right.
But the problem is, we have to make sure that the KRS statute is followed. And there
Right.
has to be a demonstrable hardship that says this is why we cannot do that, right?
Right.
And I'm just not seeing that in
Right.
this.
Well, I mean, our other
Charlie,
option
can you,
is,
do you have any input on this?
Well, again, understanding the point, but no, the chair is correct. If you have reasonable alternatives, I mean, literally, it's got to be something that just virtually prevents you from putting it in your other 14 acres. And there really isn't, except obviously the sinkhole area.
right,
And mere aesthetics, as much as we all like to benefit from that, that is not one of the grounds we can do that on.
Right.
It basically, you've got to fit the setback, or there's got to be some preventative reason for it, not just simply it looks better.
okay.
That comes back to, it's your choice. Well, the statute says if you're creating the need, that's not a good enough
Okay.
thing for us.
I mean, we can put up a hoop barn. I mean, then you don't have to worry about the property lines.
Well, I'm not sure I even understand that.
The hoop barn, like it's not a permanent structure.
Oh, I see.
So we could do that, but we really, I mean, again, aesthetically, that's not what we would like to do. We would like to enhance the property, the neighborhood, the community.
But
yeah.
we've only got certain things we have the authority to do.
Right, I understand that. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay. Any other questions? Unfortunately, this is beyond our authority, what we can grant. So
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion to deny application S-2025-05 based upon the KRS statutes. Sonia Barrett seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed by the same? There are none.
okay.
Sorry,
Thank
motion
you for your
carries.
time.
Thank you. All right, Rhett, S-2025-09.
All right, something completely different. 2179 Cincinnati Road. It's right there at the intersection of 25 and Delaplane on the east-hand side, south of Cherry Blossom as it runs through. It's a conditional use permit for secondary residence for family and farm workers, or farm workers rather. Again, it's US 25 frontage, 132 acres overall, and our recommendation here is approval. Here's the property in question, kind of face dinosaur head kind of looking deal there, kind of neat. And so this is actually a really interesting property. It's been a cool case study for us. It's technically in what we call a PACE easement, which is a type of conservation easement for agricultural and rural areas. So it's been a good learning experience going back and forth with the applicant and the administration of that authority of what can and can't be allowed. Generally, you know, it kind of extinguishes development rights and things of that nature, but this applicant has gone through the process with that body to get themselves granted, you know, a secondary residence. And so that was a pretty neat experience to learn about all that. That's kind of my X marks the spot of where they would like to place this second residence, right there centrally in the property. And this is just a letter from the administrators of PACE saying that, yes, you all do have approval and our consent to do so. They were actually even, I believe, going to let them divide the property, and they said, no, we just, you know, we want to keep it contingent, just secondary residence. So real simple, you know, our findings are here that it's yes, that it's a A1 zone property. It's got about 132 acres. I made a typo in the first line there, excuse me. Of course, they're going to meet the 50-foot setbacks. I believe it's 700 feet from the closest property line there. The ordinance, section 42L, does list secondary residences as a conditional use in an A1 zone, provided they're for family or farm workers. This will be for family members, and the applicant is here to speak to that if needed. Per the schedule of area and dimension regs, it allows for one dwelling unit for every 5 acres, being that there's one home there and 132 acres. They've got plenty of space for it. I won't bore you all with the rest of it. Essentially, no approval of this permit would not affect the general safety, health, welfare, or character of the vicinity. So as you can imagine, our recommendation here is approval. All of our conditions, for the most part, are pretty standard. Of course, if and when this person does, you know, go ahead and get their building permit and go to build their house, please come to our office, get yourself an address for free. Make sure you don't cause yourself any issues down the road. Some ones that we tacked onto the end, just being that, you know, this is a secondary residence permit. We do ask that this new structure be built 100 feet from all other homes or structures. That way, if the property were to ever subdivide, granted this isn't a conservation easement, we still ask it, that if it were to subdivide, you have always 50 feet setbacks on each side, things of that nature. And that while they do intend to share an entrance now, Any new access on US 25 or Cherry Blossom Way will require state approval. So get with them to spot you an entrance and tell you it's good, if you also choose to do that. And also on that note, that would require an amendment on the plat. But that all sounds a little complicated. Y'all will probably just share a driveway.
All right, any questions for Rhett?
Any comments or phone calls from surrounding neighbors?
I think you're the only one that asked me about
Okay,
it.
Okay.
good.
I'm assuming the applicant is over here on this side? All right. Anything you want to add? I'm not going to make you get up with the baby. Anything you want to add?
No, that was just it. It's just so that we can, be out there and that, I don't know if you know with the history of the farm or anything, but it's really special to us. So for us to be out there would be huge, so that we can help, restore its integrity and get things back up and going.
Okay, all right. Any of the neighbors here that want to speak on that? Well, in that case, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to make the motion that we approve application S-2025-09, taking into account the staff recommendations.
I'll second.
I got Tommy and Jan. I'll take Tommy as a second this time. Tommy Cooper seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. Enjoy the farm.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Mr. Chair, if you could remind me, I know we're doing some shuffling.
I believe now this becomes S-2025-12, I believe.
Okay. I'm pretty much there, but thank you at least. How about that sneak peek? There'll be a pop quiz. All right, okay. So we're actually back to variances. We're out here on Indian Creek Road now. It's a variance to reduce the side yard setback from 50 feet to 7 feet. The reason being, this is technically the expansion of a non-conforming pre-existing structure, and we'll get into some definitions regarding that here in just a moment. Context here is Cincinnati Road to Burton to Indian Creek. Real neat place out there. It's just at 5 acres. Our recommendation as such is approval. So this is the parcel in question, and we'll get some better imagery here in a moment. And we'll get even closer again here in just a second. We spoke about KRS earlier. Need to make sure that this isn't going to affect the health, safety, welfare of the general community, that there's special circumstances regarding, that the applicant isn't necessarily taking it under themselves to, cause the circumstances, or that there is circumstances that, prevent them from doing otherwise within the ordinance. Also, the zoning ordinance does state that alterations of a non-conforming structure, they should not be enlarged, replaced, or altered with the exception of conformance with the zoning ordinance. Therefore, this application is not only a variance request on its face, it's also a request for relief from the limitations placed on non-conforming structures per the ordinance. So it's kind of a 2-in-1, if that makes sense. The applicant states that they'd like to add an addition measuring about 16 by 40 on the rear of the home. It is a pre-existing structure that's been there for some time, that was there when they built it, or when they bought it, rather, excuse me. The plan is to extend the current building line and facade of the home down the eastern property line, which would still create this same essential encroachment as it exists. Expansion of the home toward the center of the property, away from the property line, that would not cause continued infringement, is impeded by the location of a septic and an old well and cistern as well. And I was able to find some good pictures of that. So this is the home as it sits. As you can see, while these are approximate property lines, it's pretty tight, both to the frontage and the side. But the variance request and relief from expansion and non-conforming is to go to the rear. This is closer here. If you can kind of see in the right angle of the back of the house, that big dark hole is what I assume is the well or cistern that is kind of keeping them from going that direction. And there seems to be a depression kind of in the shadow area. There was a drawing submitted by the applicant, I believe y'all have in your packet. By their approximation, that seems that could potentially be the septic area as well, just by looking at this imagery. So again, the intent by the applicant is to go back, and the justification being that with the presence of underground structures, the well, et cetera, that going that direction is not quite as feasible as going back. So our findings here is that the project site is a 5-acre A1 parcel. While the zone does call for 50-foot setbacks on all sides for all property lines, for all structures, the home in question is pre-existing yet non-conforming. The applicant has demonstrated that building in such a way that would get away from causing further encroachment is limited by existence of structures and things that are already there. Approval of this variance would allow the applicant full use of their property without adversely, affecting the health, safety, and welfare, encroaching any further on others, and would stay consistent and with the general character, would not cause a nuisance or an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the regulations. So overall, we do recommend approval. Again, this is kind of a 2-for-1 for the request for the variance of the side yard setback from the eastern property line from 50 to 7, as well as also this would be relief from the limitations set on the expansion of non-conforming structures set forth by the ordinance. And all of our conditions of approval here are standard. Follow the rules, get a building permit, let us know if anything changes. It's pretty well it.
Okay. Any questions for Rhett?
I've got one thing to note on the record. I represented this lady when she bought the property. I've not had anything to do with this application or anything, in fact, any discussion about this need. But I did represent her on the purchase of the property.
Duly noted. Any other questions for Rhett?
Now, I'm familiar with property myself, so I make a recommendation to approve.
Hang on, we gotta take neighbor comments first, if we got any. Is the applicant here this evening? Anything you wanna add to that?
The reason is that we just want to add another bedroom for a 5-family person, or 5 people in a family. We just want to add another there, and it's not really possible to live all of us cramped up in there. So we just want to extend just a tiny bit, another room, extend the kitchen a little bit, and that's it. And yes, we bought the property thinking, this is gonna be our good home to live in, but we didn't know that there's so many stuff going on with it, we didn't know.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Any of the neighbors wanna speak on this application? All right, if not, go for it, Tommy.
Okay. I make recommendation of approval of file S 2025-12 based upon the conditions of approval.
All right, I have a motion made by Tommy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Janet Holland seconds the motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. They will get you all the necessary paperwork that you need and all that
I'll
good
email
stuff.
you tomorrow. That way, and everybody else who's probably already left, will get your emails to you then. And you can take that to building inspection and all that, okay?
All right, now
Mr.
we're
Chair?
going to, yes, we are going to S-2025-10.
Okay.
Before we jump into this, and I knew with a lot of people being here this evening on the next 2 applications, if this isn't your application, if you're just interested, you're welcome to stay. If it's not, you're welcome to leave as well. What I would ask is if we understand emotions run high, we get that. All right, you can be passionate. Don't be pointed. Okay? Don't talk about each other. We're not into that this evening. Also, if it's repetitive and somebody has already said it, there's probably no reason to beat a dead horse. Okay? So we understand that. That way we can move through this very quickly. We'll give everybody a chance to speak that wants to, but keep the comments directed towards the application, not other people. Fair enough? All right, Rick?
Okay, going way back south from Indian Creek, that's for sure. 1376 Lexington Road, just outside of city limits actually, on US 25, but the opposite end, just under 5 acres rather. This is a request to amend an existing conditional use permit, and we'll give you some more information on that in a moment. The board does have paper copies of some of the history, minutes, application, previous approval, et cetera. If y'all have any questions regarding that, just let me know. There's some more packets there for my staff as well. So here's the parcel in question. Ag zone still. And I don't think we've actually addressed this language yet for conditional use permits themselves this evening. The conditional use permits are just that. They are those uses which are essential to or would promote the public health, safety, or welfare in one or more zones. However, which would impair the integrity of character of the zone in which it is located or in adjoining zones. By application, say if somebody chooses to put a use in a zone that's not typical or generally allowed, unless restrictions on location, size, extent, and character of performance are imposed in addition to those imposed in the zoning regulation. Conditional uses may be permitted in districts as designated under the zoning district regulations, but only when specifically approved by the Board of Adjustment. And these permits are subject to, at minimum, yearly review by staff or as needed. You know, it's not uncommon for applicants to enter, you know, voluntary kind of compliance, you know, regular check-ins. To sum it up, conditional use permits are just that. Those are uses that are allowed within zones they are typically not, as long as they are able to fit within the box of regulations that the board is empowered to place upon them. And again, those terms and conditions must be met, subject to you know, review and approval if anything changes or we get any bad news. So once we get into the consideration of authorization and permitting of these uses, again, it's a legal authorization to undertake said use as administered by you all, consisting of two parts, rather, excuse me. Basically, when making your determination, it has to be a statement of factual determination by the board, which justifies the issuance of the permit, and also has to state the special conditions which must be met in order for the use to be permitted. Okay, after all that. So, the Scott County Humane Society is seeking to amend an existing conditional use permit. It was first issued in 2020. Which allowed them to operate a pet adoption center at the property addressed at Lexington Road here. This permit is active at the property, however, it currently allows for operating hours from 12 to 5:30 p.m., Monday through Friday, with no dogs to be kept overnight. The property has not been built yet. They do have a development plan on file that was approved in 2023, and they are still kind of working on that application. I believe they're going to scale things back. I think they had some discussions with their engineer today. They've been pretty well in constant contact with us. Let us know when you're ready to move forward, as we are kind of approaching the 11th hour on this situation. The applicant is seeking to amend the hours of operation to be essentially 7 days a week, 9 to 6, and also allow for a maximum of 6 dogs to be kept overnight at any time. However, I will explain that the purpose is not to have these as permanent hours all the time. The applicant has expressed that, you know, there could be some different uses that pop up on weekends or after hours that they just want to be covered for, instead of either potentially violating the conditions of approval they've received or having to pull, you know, special use permits, things of that nature. This is the development plan, just a simple layout to show you all as it stands. Again, the applicant has stated the footprint and such and orientation will stay the same, but I believe they're going to scale the operation back a little bit. So again, they've stated, you know, some justification for requesting expanded hours as well as the hosting of dogs overnight. Basically, they anticipate being needed to either do some activity after hours or on the weekends, to include, you know, adoptions or meet and greets for folks that, you know, want to come see dogs or animals on the weekends, or say if they have a larger number of animals, to hold an event to, you know, hope they get where they need to go to loving homes. They might do medical or vaccination clinics, training activities for volunteers or fosters, fundraisers and things of that nature that, you know, wouldn't typically, you know, work during regular business hours, more availability on the weekend. Staff has found that these functions are typical of and incidental to an animal shelter that provides these services to the public, and as such is in support of this request. Now, the second part of the expansion of said permit is to allow for a maximum of 6 dogs to be housed overnight at any time. The applicant states that a growing need for temporary, short-term, and emergency housing has led them to this request. I'll let them speak more to the context of you know, what's going on in that field of service. However, they have said that allowing this would remediate the following situations. You know, people that have adopted an animal, returning an animal short notice, things of that nature, unplanned emergencies affecting foster homes, whether that be just an at-home thing, you know, family sickness, bad weather, things of that nature, safety concerns with foster homes, you know, animal control situations that need to be remediated and the animal returned where it come from. Services to provide relief for disaster situations, fires, storms, floods, things of that nature, and also lessen the general burden on the animal care and control facility that's run by Scott County. Now, we do, as staff, recognizes that these uses are meant to be temporary and not necessarily permanent. We do acknowledge that, you know, temporary housing of dogs certainly could overlap, correct? We do recognize that, well, you know, this dog is here for 2 nights, but dog B came in, you know, the second night and is here for 3. We understand that this use may overlap, but at the same time, it is not the intent, you know, upon the recommendation of approval of this allowance, that these functions become the primary and sole function to be considered permanent functions of the property. So, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Otherwise, in general, we do support this request as well. So in summary, it's just under 5 acres, A1, south side of town, just outside of city limits. Section 412F makes it conditionally permissible for the operation of quasi-government associations to include nonprofits to operate as conditional uses in this zone. As a local nonprofit serving the public good, applicant does fall under this umbrella. And the Scott County Humane Society, which is the current applicant, is seeking to amend the permit they were issued back in 2020. And overall, the approval of this permit would not, again, adversely impact public safety, health, welfare, et cetera, or cause undue nuisance, with the acknowledgement that proper and appropriate measures be put in place as conditions of approval by both either recommended by staff at this time, or if the board seeks to add additional considerations and conditions of approval, if we're able to operate within that box, staff believes that, this should no cause any extenuating circumstances for any neighbors or anything.
Okay, any questions for Rhett? All right. Thanks, Rhett.
And I should also describe that there are a number of conditions as set forth by their development plan, screening, plantings, fencings, and things. Most particularly, we do have an agricultural screening ordinance, which includes fencing, no-climb fence. I'm sure y'all are familiar with that concept, being on the county board and county residents. It also includes, certain types of planting at certain intervals. The entirety of the property is surrounded by A1 zone, and as such, even though it is an agricultural use, it is somewhat of a departure from traditional uses that could affect other ag uses. So this property in entirety is subject to being beholden to that ordinance. So. Anyway, so in general, the conditions of approval here are pretty standard. Number 4 and 5, again, just kind of reiterate that overnight housing of dogs, while we know temporary instances may overlap, it is not the intent for it to become a primary function of this facility. And also just to reiterate the conditions of this permit and the development plan, they shall constitute review of this application if they're not complied with, and we found that they're not functioning as we hope they would.
Okay. Anybody?
And I believe that's really all I've got.
Is the applicant here this evening? Yes. Do you want to say anything more than what Red has already added?
Unless there's any negative comments, we can address those. But
We'll move on to the neighbors first. All right. I know there are neighbors here that want to speak on this comment, so who wants to go first? Anybody?
Can I just make one
Yes,
point of
please.
clarity, though?
Yep, go ahead.
Being that we're here at the Board of Adjustments for consideration of conditional use permit, we're not necessarily here to talk development plan standards and processes as well, okay?
Fair.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Mr. Quarles?
Good evening, I'm Roger Quarles. I own the property that adjoins this application. When they made this initial application some years ago, I did not oppose the conditional permit, but their strongest selling points that night, no overnight dogs and limited hours. That was their promise. Now here we are tonight wanting to expand that, and they haven't turned a shovel full of dirt. They haven't done anything. They certainly haven't satisfied the fencing and the buffering ordinance that could be done next week without affecting the construction. I'd sure like to see that to become a part of this conditional permit, that they go ahead and get that done. I did look on their website today. Their hours listed as 12:30 to 5:30 each day, closed on weekends. So this additional work that they want to do, and I am not opposed to adopting dogs whatsoever, but they're not even doing their hours, expanded hours today with the offices that they have. So I'd have to question why that would be. I don't know how you go keep up and with the dogs that are housed overnight. I mean, who's gonna keep track of whether it's 2 dogs tonight, 3 dogs tomorrow, or same dogs? Well, I don't know I don't see how you could ever keep up with that. But if you do allow that, if you happen to do that, I would want all those dogs to be inside the building every single night with no dogs outside whatsoever. I've also, our neighbors to the pet hotel out there, and I just wish you could come out and listen to the noise from those dogs from about 10 to 4 every day. We did have a permit out there to operate an agricultural event process for picnics and things like that. We haven't booked a single event since that pet hotel went in, because when they come out, they hear the dogs over there. We had a wedding out there, but nobody's going to have a wedding when they hear dogs in the background. So that's something we have to live with today, and I sure don't want more of that to go on. And I'm gonna guess your next application, you're gonna hear a lot about noise and things from dogs. But I would request that they go ahead and do the buffering part. I'd like, if you do allow the animals overnight, I really want them to be inside the building every night. It'd be nice to have a 24-hour contact, because what if something goes wrong?
Agreed,
I'm next
yeah.
door, so I'm gonna hear about it. Where we live out there, you know, I know all my neighbors. I've got their phone numbers. If there's a cow out or something like that, I can get a hold of them. But we can't get a hold of anybody at the pet hotel. They were supposed to provide us with a 24-hour contact when they did that one some years back, and that's never occurred. But, and I was wondering if there would be somebody in the building at the time the dogs are there. It'd be nice if they were. You know, we take care of our animals 24 hours a day. But other than that, these are just some considerations I hope you can think about while that you make your decision. Is there any questions?
Anybody got any questions? Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Roger. You may want to join us at this point. Yep.
Any other comments?
I'm going to questions.
Hi, my name is Alex Cantrell. I'm a board member for the Scott County Humane Society, and this is Cassie Ernst. There's a tremendous need for our services here in Scott County, and so our goal is just to be able to perform at our full potential, and that's the only reason why we have filed this amendment to the conditional use permit. You know, on that note, I'm joined here today by several of our board members. You know, we're a nonprofit. We have 2 employees that are there, 1 part-time. It's difficult, right? These board members are working all the time. You would not believe the amount of work that they're doing day in and day out to fulfill the needs of this community. What these amendments do is just give us some flexibility to be able to do that. And I'll let Cassie add on anything she does.
Yeah, sure. So thank you all again for the time, and I appreciate the concerns. Again, we wanted to be proactive in this as we're getting very close. We've been talking closely with the planning and zoning folks and hope to really break ground this year. And so that's where we went back and reviewed if the organization's grown in the last 5 years. And so that was the time to make sure we're good neighbors and communicate how we plan to use this conditional use. And that's the request we're making today.
Any questions?
Is it too early to ask about any specific
No,
questions?
no, I'm going to ask too. Okay, so when we first heard this was 2020, almost 5 years ago. And I think Mr. Quarles brings up a good point, because in the letter that was written, it specifically says dogs are never kept at our facility overnight. So when we approved these things, that was the understanding why we approved them. Okay, so at that time, and maybe it was somebody else that wrote it, maybe it was something else going on, I don't know. But even in the application, it states that's a big selling point. So to come back and change it now is a little bit out of the boundary, in my opinion, especially when no shovel's even been stuck in the ground yet. Okay, so how do you address those concerns when it flat says in 2020, when we approved it, that no dogs will be there overnight?
I'll take it, and Cassie can correct me if I misspeak. In terms of the building, you know, building prices skyrocketed in 2020, and that's been some of our delay in getting the building built, and we hope to have break ground here this summer. My understanding is due to the growing nature of Georgetown-Scott County, that shelter is becoming increasingly full. The other issue is, you know, we want to be able to facilitate these adoptions. We want to be able to have people come and potentially meet some of these animals in person in a safer environment, an environment more suitable to adoptions than down at the shelter. Those can be late in the afternoon, et cetera. Like I said, we've got limited staff. Sometimes getting from Georgetown Road all the way around to the shelter at 4:30, you know, you think you were in Lexington sometimes. It just gives us a little bit of flexibility to facilitate that. The intention's not to have them there regularly.
Yeah, and I think, as Alex said, the county is growing, our foster program has grown, so that's a huge difference, I think, from the last 5 years. A lot of that is dog-based, right, because that's the belief of the Humane Society, is to be a foster-based rescue, but that is one of the things that has come up very recently with fosters having issues that come up, and then the other one most recently was with the flooding, for example. We got contacted and asked if we could take any animals, and the answer was, do we have fosters that are available, or do we need some shuffling that can happen? So that's really the request. Again, as Rhett stated, I think perfectly, it's not the intent to become the shelter, but just to give us that little bit of flexibility, which is where we intentionally set the number at 6. Hopefully we never use it, but if we do, it's there and we want to be proactive and see if that's something we can utilize.
I have a question. So Mr. Pauls had asked, if you did have 1 or 2 dogs overnight, if we did allow that, would someone be on site with these dogs? Would they be kept inside at all times? Would they wouldn't be wandering around by themselves on the property?
Yeah, again, I think it's very intentional to say they would be kept inside. Again, even before we go down that road, we would want to make sure we have appropriate plans to manage those. Obviously, as Alex said, we have 1.5 staff right now. We're not exactly set up to do that at this point, but that's the intent of this conditional use request, is can we set up for that in the future as the organization continues to grow? So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Can I say a few things as a long-term volunteer? I didn't sign up.
Yeah, hang on just 1 second. Any other questions for applicants here?
So you're not speaking overnight immediately, even once y'all started this, so the neighbors could see how things were developing before that would even become an issue, so we could approve that later.
Add that to the conditions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You can speak. You'll have to stand up, and Charlie will have to swear you in. Sorry,
I
Charlie.
don't have you on this long list.
My name's Connie Morse, M-O-R-S-E, like a horse,
Swear affirm.
yes.
Thank you.
I've been a 20-year volunteer for Scott County Humane Society, and I just want to address a couple things, like when he was talking about we're open from 12 to 5:30, and we are. Okay, we are a volunteer-run organization. Most of the people that are doing things are volunteers. I've done many meet and greets on the weekend. Somebody wants to adopt a cat, I have the cat in foster home. I go over there Sunday evening, bring the cat, meet the person. That's what we're talking about, meet and greets. We aren't gonna be open on the weekend. You know, so that's why we just wanna make sure everything is legal. As far as the dogs, there are just things that come up. We have a shelter here. We don't wanna house dogs, you know, on a regular basis there. Like we had one dog, a cat, attack a cat in the foster home. We had to get the dog out of there. Hopefully they can go to another foster home without cats, but we have to have somewhere to put them. We have a policy. We want our animals, if it doesn't work out and if an animal's adopted, we want them back. We don't want them to end up in another shelter. We want them with us. And sometimes all of our foster homes are full. And sometimes people bring them back at 10 o'clock at night. You know, that's why we need to be able to house them there. We don't want, and I would want them in at night. I don't want some Looney Tune coming and trying to kill our dogs, you know, poison them. So, you know, we want to be good neighbors, but we also want to do, you know, help our animals. So.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this application?
If I could appreciate her comments that she said they're not gonna be open on weekends, but I'm reading one of the emails from one of the board members saying they want expanded hours 7 days a week, 9 to 6. That's from the board.
I think she's saying just meet and greet only on weekends, not like open
I mean,
full-time,
we're
is that what you're
not
saying?
gonna be open for,
Well, but I will.
But we just wanna cover ourselves. If I do a meet and greet, I just wanna cover.
That's different than what has been stated.
Yeah.
Is that correct? I mean, what has been stated, Holden, I'm looking at you actually, sorry. But what has been stated currently is Monday through Sunday, right?
So, Brett, do you mind to go back to the list of, do you mind to show that list of events? Because we were very intentional about this selection, what it says it was for.
Overnight.
Overnight, yes, please. So, again, the way we requested is the flexibility to have potential hours, right? It would be amazing if at one point in the future, as we grow, we can staff to have weekend hours, right, normally. So we reach more members that aren't available from 12 to 5:30 during the week. The other things, like the ad hoc events, or the things like this, that we may, and we have now currently, right, we'd like to continue to grow those, and that's a request for this hour change, is to give us the flexibility to do either one of those things, and just be transparent and forward about it now, so we can make appropriate plans as we move into this new building. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, this kind of summarizes the things that we could do during that time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Chairman Dillon, if there's no other members of the public who'd like to speak, staff would just like to spend
Please.
one more moment. Having heard kind of the discussion between the community as well as the applicants, staff at this time would like to reiterate our support for the amendment to this conditional use permit, while also recommending several additional conditions that we'd like the board to consider. The first is as members of the applicant team discussed, sometimes animals get dropped off at 10 o'clock at night. That kind of points to, again, what the community brought forward, which is a need for that 24-hour contact. If there's a number that a returning, foster parent is able to call, then the community should be able to call that number as well. Secondarily, we would like to specify in the conditions that animals kept overnight can only be kept inside. And that seems like both the applicant as well as the community would be very amicable to that. Also, there was a question of how do we know this will not become a primary use to keep animals overnight. As I'm sure you can imagine, as we already went through one code enforcement case tonight, code enforcement is very difficult, and that would be very difficult for staff to make a spot determination of. So with that in mind, what staff is recommending is what we call the dog log. If an animal is being kept overnight at the facility, there needs to be a record created of that staff can review in the event that staff needs to do any sort of, like, again, that yearly compliance review, just so that we are aware of those numbers and the community can be made aware of those numbers as well. Additionally, as is kind of pointed out, this is an idea for growth. And, as the operation expands, we understand that things will be picked up as it goes. So to that statement, staff would like to impose that there be no overnight stay of animals for the first 6 months of operation of the facility after that certificate of occupancy is obtained. Again, I think that'll allow for, again, the community to, again, see that the idea was not to build and immediately start hosting overnight. And then finally, slight oversight, I think, in staff's review and staff's recommendations, we've talked a lot about dogs, but as we've heard here tonight, cats are a thing too. And so if we're going to specify that 6 dogs can be kept overnight, I think some numbers should also be applied, some metrics should be applied for cats as well. Understanding that cats and dogs are a little bit different, and that cats don't make quite as much noise, but it's still important that we design conditions around that as well. Having no idea what ratio cats to dog could be, it might just be simpler to say no more than 6 animals could be kept overnight at any one time. And so with that, again, it looks like we. Yeah. Please.
So that would be, I think, a contradiction to base function, because as it sits now, we do keep small animals, right? Guinea pigs, cats in the existing adoption center, and that is a primary function of the building, right? The dogs overnight is not a condition we have now currently, and that's where, again, for the growth, that flexibility to do that, which we've already talked about, is the change. So I think we would be opposed to that language change, because that's very much against the current base operation and the existing conditional use, if that makes sense.
What would you foresee as your limitation then on other animals?
Yeah, so I think right now we keep anywhere from 30, kittens sometimes flex, so it's a little bit hard off the cuff to have a fixed number, but there are guidelines around that, because that's what we're looking at from the building construction side that recommend kind of per space. But I think off the cuff, we at least 30 cats in the existing adoption center, with, again, the idea of the new building is to grow that organization as well, that piece, right?
So the language you oppose to is what?
Is revising dogs to animals with a number limit. Because again, the intent for, I think, the dogs overnight was around noise and just not becoming a shelter-based or kennel. But that doesn't, I think, equally apply to cats, if that makes sense.
But you're not planning on making this an overnight permanent for cats?
But that is the base operation now. So yes, the answer is yes. That's exactly how it's used now.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Give me just a second. Holden, can you come back up, please? I guess my question, Holden, was that staff's understanding of what the base operation is now?
So what I would have to do is I'd have to refer back to the original application for 2020. If you'll give me just one moment, I would like to review that. Because what we want to do again is make sure that we are in line. So the description back from 2020 is the construction of a new adoption center. It would allude that adoptions are going to be taking place there. I'll further look at the specific letter that we have. So it does state that we do keep some cats at our adoption center. And so again, some is squishy language. It may be beneficial, again, if we're constructing a 5,000 square foot building, just to understand exactly kind of what capacity that's creating. Understanding that that is the primary intent of the building, and staff is still supportive of the conditional use if that's the primary intent. But, you know, for the sake of my dog log, it would be nice to know how many we expect to be in there. And so if right now it's 30, anticipating that we're building a new center for some amount of growth, I would defer again to the applicant to try to narrow that down just a little bit.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Sorry, I didn't sign in as well.
Oh, Charlie, there you go again. Sorry.
Do you swear or affirm?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Your
I
name,
swear.
please?
My name is Gina Burge, JeanaBurge. I'm also a board member with Scott County Humane Society. We want to be the best stewardess for our community. We also like to, once we accept a dog into our program and adopt them out, to be able to accept them back, okay? It's been easier to do that with cats because we have been able to allow them in our adoption center currently. So if there isn't an open foster home, they can go there. The problem is dogs, right? We don't have the same problem. We don't have the same option for dogs. So right now what happens if we get a return that we don't have a foster home for, unfortunately we have to say, I'm sorry, we don't have space right now. If you can't wait, you have to turn in at the shelter, which if it's Scott County creates an unforeseen burden on our county shelter that we try to avoid, right? Or if we don't, we board them next door at the Central Kentucky Pet Resort, right, which is right across the fence. So all we're asking for is a concession to be able to do some of those things for a few days as we make other plans and concessions for the animal, as a spot opens up at a foster home. We're a firm believer that foster homes are the best for the animals, right? We're not our intent to become the shelter at all, but we believe we need this flexibility. Also, the original application, there was no word of number of animals. I don't think there should be a restriction on cats. Cats don't really have, you know, any kind of, they don't create a lot of noise. But we're responsible about how we keep them at the center. We try to limit their amount of stay in the center. They also rotate out to other foster homes and adoption centers. So we're trying to be good neighbors. The dogs overnight, we would hope to be the exception, right? Because we want to help the animal and we need to swap for a few days. Or we had our neighboring shelter in Harrison County that potentially flooded. We would like to help them with dogs, but we had no space for 2 or 3 days to house the dogs for them. So it would be those kind of instances we would like to help our community with. Okay, we want to be responsible and help as much as we can help. And we're trying to put these into place so that one, we're forthcoming, right? And two, so we're set when we start, right? We're not trying to cover the wool over anyone's eyes. We're just trying to be very responsible. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me say one more thing about the cats.
One more.
We do move cats pretty quickly. Remember, we do have Central Park Cat Cafe here. We take our cats to Feeder Supply. We take them to PetSmart. We also go to PetSmart every weekend. So the 30 cats there they're moved very quickly into those places, so.
can I get a clarity, and maybe the applicant can tell me this, can I get a clarity on what hours you are actually proposing to be physically there?
Can I ask a clarifying question to your question? In terms of staffing or in terms of volunteers? So,
In terms of staffing and volunteer, when is somebody going to be open, when is it going to be open? Let's put it that way.
yeah, so staffing right now is before the 12 to 5, and we be coming at like 9:30 to 10, because again, there's animals there that they need to care for.
Yeah, can you come back to the podium, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so again, current operation, opening hours are 12 to 5:30. We've got staff there ahead of that to care and staff after, right? We also have volunteers coming and going because there are animals at the center, again, cats, at the existing location. So it would be similar to that, which is where right now the opening hours would likely not be changing at day one. But in the future, if we can extend or grow to the weekend to give people to come in, that's the intent. But then volunteers come and go, again, pretty much that 9 to 6. In the original application, we mentioned some evening meetings for our board. As we said, all volunteers, it's usually from like 6 to 8 p.m. is when those working meetings happen for those different committees. But that's usually during the week. And that's in alignment with the existing original application.
All right, so you're proposing 9 to 6 at this point, and that's Monday through Sunday?
9 to 6 Monday through Sunday is potential opening hours where we could have public members effectively come in and out. We may still have staff or volunteers there 24/7 if we have animals there like dogs overnight, that we would clearly need to be there beyond those opening hours, if that makes sense.
Any other questions?
Charlie, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I think this is strictly a matter of what can they actually do to serve, and what can we do to make sure that doesn't, disrupt neighbors or the area, and what conditions we can put on to avoid disruption while allowing reasonable use, especially since we've already approved the conditional use. This is just a matter of trying to fine tune it in a sense, but we still have the same obligation of to try to keep that from becoming a problem for the area.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Mr. Quarles, can I borrow you for a second? From a neighbor's perspective,
Yes, sir.
we understand what you feel about dogs being there on property, outside. What do you feel about keeping them inside?
That's what I've asked for. If you're gonna have them there, they have to be inside.
Okay.
All I'm looking to do is minimize, if not eliminate, the noise. That's what I would like to have, the additional traffic in and out. We're gonna see headlights coming back and forth, which would be somewhat of a disruption. It sits in the matter of agriculture. It's in the green zone, which we were told there's nothing would ever happen, but now it is happening. It's a commercial lot. It's been advertised as a commercial lot for years, and Mr. Perkins has been a part of that. But at the same time, I just want them to take care of the responsibilities that they should to the adjoining neighbors, just to minimize, if not eliminate, the noise that's potentially could come from anything that houses dogs. Yeah, because I've got that now. I'm swamped with it, with the pet hotel next door. It ruined our event business out there, and I don't need to add anything to that. But if, personally, at the end of the day, as far as I think you need to table the whole thing until they get their building up and going. That would be my solution to it, because they talked about downsizing the building a little bit, but yet they're going to expand. That doesn't mesh too well with my thinking. But yeah, to me, if they, it doesn't surprise me that they've come back, but to come back before they got the building going, that's a little bit unexpected, I guess. So that would be, my solution would be to table it until you get your building up and going and get the activities done that they'd already promised to do, and then talk about maybe if there's a need for expansions. Because it's been 5 years, nothing's happened, and let the building get up and going, and then talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything to say on this that hasn't been said already? Well, here comes the fun part then. Thank you. Go ahead. These are tough. These are tough for multiple reasons, because no matter what we do, somebody's not gonna be happy. By the way, you all are next, just so you know. Yep, you're welcome. But what I will say, and what gives me a bit of heartburn, is when we first had this application in 2020, there were stipulations pointed out at that time. To be able to come back and now change those is a bit troublesome for us. Please don't get me wrong. I love animals as much as the next person. We have dogs, cats, cattle, and everything else, okay? So it has nothing to do with that. My heartburn becomes when somebody brings a foster dog back, that's awful. But the problem is now it's awful for the neighbors as well, right? So it extends past just that individual who brings that dog back. It affects everybody around them. And this is tough. I think, well, I can't think. I'll just do it. I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make two motions. My first motion is going to be on the hours, and we'll split this up in two motions. So my first motion is based upon the hours. I'll make a motion that the hours can be extended from 9 to 6 as requested, taking into account the staff recommendations. And I'll take a second on that one, or
I'll second that.
Ms. Barrett seconds that motion. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed by same sign? There are none. That motion carries. My second motion, however, is to deny the right for dogs to stay overnight, as per the application based in 2020. Now, if something changes in the future and that comes back up, that's your all's discretion. You can reapply and go through that again. But I'll make a motion to deny that portion of the application based upon what I just said, the original application from 2020. That will need a second.
I'll second.
Ms. Holland seconds that motion. Any questions or comments? All approved by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
2 to 2. Oh, Charlie. Unfortunately, I know what's coming.
Well, I'm still writing your last motions, just 1 second. Well, without a positive vote one way or the other, you've taken no action on that part of the application. Probably the best result, whether that's a potential result or not, is you keep discussing it and come up with another motion, and hopefully until you can either vote it up or vote it down. One possibility, just, and this is just from listening to the conversation, while I don't personally agree that we should wait till the building's built, because they need to take this into consideration when they're building the building. So I don't think that's quite reasonable. But on the other hand, it may well be something that you want to think about, or they want to give more information about. I mean, for example, actual numbers of experience. I know we've heard a lot about, oh, well, this is a problem, that's a problem. Well, how about some actual numbers? So perhaps if the other half of the application were continued for a month, let them compile their numbers and come in and say, this is why, 6 overnight is reasonable. Or maybe you hear the numbers and you say, I'm not so sure that it is. And then again, they can come back later if it's denied. But I think that way you've got all the information, or anything else they come up with perhaps, but you've got all the information necessary to really be clear. Is that something we need to do now, or is it not? But again, I do think it's reasonable that they want to have this information when they finish the design of the building, so.
This is my last meeting for the last 8 years, so thank you for this, by the way.
And if he doesn't straighten up, we won't thank him for the 8 years he's given.
No.
Should I say thank you next month?
Yeah, all right. I do agree with Charlie. I think there needs to be some more discussion had to this. I'm not going to leave the board in limbo with 2 to 2, so I don't think that's right either. What I will say, what works out best when this occurs is you usually get with the neighbors. Mr. Coral sitting in the back and the other neighbors, figure out a design of the building that works, where he's not affected by the noise and everything else going on, that's the best outcome. You can't plan ahead until you get an answer on that, right? Is that fair? All right. I will make a recommendation. I will amend my motion, Charlie. I'll make a motion to continue this application for at least one more month to allow you all to work with your neighbors, to come up with a plan, and to bring statistics back to the board to show what the evidence is for dogs staying overnight. That part should only need a second.
I'll second to that.
Janet Holland seconds that part.
Hold on just a second, let me finish writing, so before I get too far
Will
behind.
you keep up?
My finger's nearly numb now.
Yeah, and just from what he's telling you, also, I know you keep saying in the future things will grow, but get like more definitive for the short term, and then if y'all outgrow that need, we could always look at it again later, you know? Don't just ask for the pie in the sky, you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely, and our thought process is just to be as proactive as possible. And if
Yes.
there's any indication of how we'll work with Mr. Burrows in the future, I hope that's a sign of that, we're just trying to get out there.
Mr. Chairman, why don't you take another shot at your motion so I can make sure I've got it correct?
All right. I amend the second portion, which is the dogs overnight, staying overnight. I will amend that to a continuation. So I'll make a motion to continue that for 30 days to allow the applicants to work with the neighbors and gather statistics.
So not statistics for a particular purpose, but just gather statistics on the for the
General.
application?
Correct.
Yes, sir, okay.
Janet Holland seconded that motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed by the same? There are none. That motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's what I was afraid of. You all are welcome on that one. All right. You want to stretch? Yeah, everybody want to stretch for a minute?
I will go out and check, make sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
Are you all cold or something?
Yeah, I'm freezing. It's over. It's behind that lady's head.
Do we need to take a 5 minute?
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So we'll take a 5-minute break and be back. Couple of things before we get started on this application, because obviously this is our last application. So there's some very interested parties here for this application this evening. I'll get back to that in a second. I need to make a clarifying remark on the last application. I said 30 days. That is not the April meeting. That is the May meeting. Okay, so for the records, the Scott County Humane Society will be back in May, not April. Okay, so housekeeping, sorry about that. All right, so 30 days from that. So that is the May meeting. On this application that we have, these have a tendency to be contentious, if you will. We are all in the same county. You will run into each other on a daily basis, sometimes every other day. This is my nice way to say, be nice. I reserve the right to call you out, and I reserve the right to ask you to stop talking. I'm telling you up front. Okay, that's the easiest way I can do that. If you're polite, we're good. What I would ask you to do is hold your comments down to about 2 minutes, if possible. Take the emotions out of it. We are not here to talk about the applicant, but we are here to talk about the application. There's a big difference in those two. Fair? That way we all get along, right? I don't want to see anybody leaving mad or anything else. This is a daily business. If it goes back and forth against anybody, I will call you out. We will end it at that point. I also will say, if you can't walk to the podium, but you want to speak, we will bring the microphone to you, but I ask you not to pass it around because we can't hear on the record keeping for that, on the recording. All right, good shape? There are also multiple entities represented here this evening. I understand there is Payne's Landing, there is Canewood, I believe, and probably more that I don't know. So what we're going to try to do is keep those entities together. Okay, that way we can stay in nice little subdivisions with each other. Right? So we'll figure out how to do that. All right, I think that's all the clarifying comments. Brett, let's go.
Okay, Brett, before we start, because I live in one of the surrounding neighborhoods that's involved in this application, I feel like I may not be totally objective one way or the other, so therefore I'm going to recuse myself from this application.
Thank you for making this that much harder. I appreciate it.
But we won't tie this time.
Yep.
The good news, Mr. Chair, is it's now an odd number.
Yeah, there will not be a tie at this point, I can
Yes.
tell you that.
Yes. Mr. Dillo, I'm gonna miss you. So,
Thank you.
yeah, let's go out good, right? Okay. 95 La Costa Drive. This is a conditional use permit for the operation of a pet boarding and grooming service as a home occupation. Home occupation means it's a type of conditional use permit at which the applicant will live full time. Now, I made a little error. I spent a lot of time out in White Oak years ago, and so I was under the impression that that old farm road was still an access way right off to Lissa. It is not. Holden and I discovered that the other day on a site visit, and we pulled up to a real shiny, brand new blue farm gate and realized we'd made a mistake pretty quickly. So the good news is the access to this property is directly from Payne's Landing Boulevard. So the access that I described in the packet and to some others, the shortest way being right off to Lissa, adjacent to White Oak, of course, is no longer the case. And I'll illustrate that here in just a moment. And nuts and bolts of it, of course, we all know A1 zone. This parcel is right at 5 acres. The reason why I'm sure a lot of people are here is the recommendation of approval. So here we are, is the property in question. Again, I will clarify again that access on the southeast corner has been abandoned, denoted by the bright red X there, as well as the new access and the only access to the in or out of the property is denoted by the red arrow there. It's a private drive at the termination of La Costa and Payne's Landing. And so the applicant solely uses this to come and go for their home use and as well with the clients. And again, this is the access point that I erroneously thought still existed. And down there at the red X, there used to be a farm road that accessed this parcel as well as another. Different separate ownership, different uses currently. So that access is no longer accessible. But again, all the way in the top left there is the access point as it stands. So just that point of clarity. Yes.
Go back to the picture for that. Okay, thank you.
We've been over this, once earlier tonight. Conditional use permits are meant to facilitate, small business diversification of the economy, et cetera, in zones which they would not normally occur, to include home occupations where somebody runs a business out of their home. The expectation as staff and the board is if, an applicant were to receive an approval for a conditional use that doesn't normally exist in a particular zone or situation, that the applicant would be successful within the bounds of the conditions placed upon by themselves as recommendations from the staff, as well as, agreed to or added upon by the board. That is, at its core, what a conditional use is. And again, I'll reiterate, all permits, that are approved are subject to, at minimum, yearly review and inspection by staff themselves. And if need be recalled and reviewed by the board, we've had a few instances, sadly, this year and in the past where we've done so. So again, the goal is for everybody to be successful, follow the rules, stay within the box if they do receive approval. And again, the findings, as far as, approval of said authorizations is that, the statements made must be a factual determination by the board which justify the issuance of the permit. And again, it's a statement of the special conditions which must be met in order for the use to be permitted. Now, again, these could be simply the recommendations you have in front of you, or it could be conditions that you place on in addition. The conditions, of course, must be reasonable for both sides, protect both the applicant as well as the community that surrounds. That is the goal. Section 412K of the ordinance does list kennels as a conditional use in an A1 zoning district. I'll stop there before I kind of give the description. I didn't do this before, that this is a very uncommon circumstance. This property is an island in the stream. It's an old generational farm that was kind of sectioned up as things went along, and as such it was swallowed up by annexed properties. This property has not been annexed into city limits. It adjoins city limits on pretty well every side. Annexation is voluntary. I believe at one time this property was gifted or sold to the college, and now it's gone into private hands. So that's where we're at. It's an A1 island in the stream. So to get back to the definition of kennels, kennels are a commercial business for the sale or temporary boarding of 3 or more animals, dogs specifically here in this case, over the age of 6 months old, not including those owned by the resident or property owner. Now, when we do talk about kennels, our ordinance is pretty explicit in the standards and guidelines that they are expected to follow. These are separate from, humane societies and nonprofits, things of that nature. These are totally separate animals, I guess. All buildings and areas used in conjunction in whole or for the part of a commercial kennel, including the runs, shall be a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines. All these runs or exercise yards, outside areas used for the kennel shall be located on the property so as to minimize any off-site impacts, including but not limited to noise, sight, sound, smells, essentially, loose animals, this, that, and the other, anything that could potentially happen. The Board of Adjustments and/or Planning Commission may direct the location of such areas as part of the conditional permit and use development plan respectively. Again, once you all see all the details of this proposition tonight, if you all see fit to add additional conditions or considerations to accomplish these goals, please do so. To continue about runs and outside areas, these shall be fenced to ensure that no animals may leave the site. That is a very general, basic expectation. In addition, any outside areas used in conjunction must be screened by a row of evergreen trees no more than 30 feet on center, or staff and the board may take into consideration existing conditions of the site to see what screening exists, as mature tree lines or shrubbery, fencing, etc. It may be deemed appropriate. The board may deem that it needs to be added to. That's why we're here this evening. Any area where dogs are kept overnight shall be soundproofed, the word there being shall, not maybe, could be, shall. Be soundproof to minimize any off-site impacts. All signage shall be reviewed and approved by the Board of Adjustments as part of the conditional use request. Signage availability for home occupations is very small if the applicant even chooses to do so. I believe the number is, well, I'll refer to the sign ordinance if we need so. I don't want to misspeak at this point. Applicants for conditional use approvals shall state the maximum number of animals to be kept on site. Again, shall. This is a ceiling of expectations that it's a threshold that's not to be crossed. At such time, if the capacity is to change or business model changes, it's standard with conditional use permits. They must return to us for review and consideration. Back to the property itself, the northwest portion of the house part of the property is the proposed area to be used for the outdoor section of the business. Mr. Fleming and myself stepped it off the other day. It's approximately 40 by 70. Sections of it are essentially a fence within a fence. And so this is, kind of a better view of the property to set the context. Again, it's an island in the stream of an agricultural zoned rural property, not yet annexed, that abuts residential properties essentially on all sides that are, even if they're not developed yet, I believe that portion up there to the northeast is zoned for medium density actually, and just has not been developed. So this is the view essentially from like the property line that abuts White Oak, and I'll go back here in just a moment. There is some parking area, as you can see, with the vehicles oriented, that if they were pulled in head-on, they do face White Oak directly. As such, as you can see here again, those are the rear of some of the White Oak units to the south. That parking area, again, right there, centrally located. There are some trees and things along that line. However, through concerns brought to us by residents, as well as, on-site meetings with the applicant, it's been discussed that the board may consider, adding additional screening requirements in that area to mitigate headlights, sight sounds, things of that nature. If we need to get very specific with it, staff is prepared for that. We've brought with us our landscape buffering and uses ordinance book as well, which is supplementary to our standard zoning ordinance. Y'all probably haven't seen a lot of it being Board of Adjustments. It's typically a development plan book, but if we want to get real specific with screening and things here, we are prepared this evening to do so. And what the applicant has proposed so far, and some of which they've already done on their own accord, and I'll let them speak more to it in just a moment. They're proposing a 6-foot-tall privacy fence along property boundaries. I can't say that that's inclusive that they're going to wall themselves in like a fortress. I'll let the applicant speak to it. But I know there is privacy fencing going in at the northeast or northwest side, kind of the back of the house up to property lines. There were some things discussed on site with myself and Mr. Fleming and the applicant the other day. I'll let the applicant kind of elucidate on their thoughts since that discussion. Any plank-style fence or gate will also have wire within to prevent animals from getting through. And all of these runs will be located greater than 100 feet from property lines as stated by the applicant. Just to kind of circle back to all those requirements, after the application was submitted and we got through a certain phase of it, I was very direct with the applicant. I submitted them the exact list of requirements and said, are you prepared before we put you on the agenda and all that? Before I send this staff report out, are you prepared as a business owner to meet all these standards? And at the time they agreed, and of course, approval would constitute having to adhere to those standards as well. The applicant has also stated that no dogs will be allowed outside without supervision. So here is essentially the fence within the fence. This plank fencing here, which it's kind of hard to see, there is wire mesh in between all the planks to prevent, anybody or anything or any animals going through the center sections of the fence. On the left-hand side here, you see more of your traditional privacy fence that borders, I believe, on that northwest property line as well. Just more continued pictures of fence and gate. The applicant has also stated that there should be or will be a maximum of 30 dogs to be housed or served at any given time. Again, this is a maximum. If you all see fit to address that number or ask the applicant for more clarity on that, please do so. After conferring with Scott County Animal Care and Control, there is no actual limitation on the number of animals that can be housed or serviced for by an organization such as this. I asked them a lot of very specific questions. What's the capacity? What are the ratio of employees to animals, et cetera? And essentially, Animal Control said, as long as they're able to operate under a conditional use with a proper LLC, up until the point that there's an issue that we get involved and deem that it's, unsafe, unsanitary, inappropriate, then we will step in and create some sort of enforcement. But as far as metrics, they did not give me any. These operations are subject to inspection by Animal Control and Care, code enforcement, et cetera. And of course, if it's under conditional use permit by the board and staff, then we step in too. But typically, a lot of this stuff is Animal Care and Control's wheelhouse. But from the permitting side of things, of course, any violation of any of the standards, that are continued in non-compliance, at such time a permit could be reviewed and, reassessed. Overall, staff does recommend the approval of this application as the described uses and measures that will be put in place or can be put in place by additional conditions of approval. To minimize impacts to the surrounding community will satisfy the requirements of the ordinance on its face. And then the conditions of approval here are are pretty standard, but we have added some additional ones at the bottom here. Obviously, any waste generated by this operation shall be collected, contained, and disposed of in a manner that will prevent any offsite effects. The applicant shall instruct the clientele to take the most direct route to the property with the least impact to surrounding properties or neighborhoods. Again, that access off DeLissa is no longer a thing, so really the only way they can access is essentially from Paynes Landing Boulevard, whatever direction they come. The rest of the requirements are essentially our standards by, conditional use permits, come see us if anything's changed, et cetera, that. The applicant did propose to cease operations at 10 p.m. Staff considered that number and through conversation with the applicant came to a number of 8 p.m. on any given day. There also shall be no allowance of animals outdoors without proper supervision and containment. Applicant shall return to the board prior to any changes in conditions, and failure to comply with any of the conditions of this permit shall constitute a review of this application.
Any questions for Rhett? All right, thanks, Rhett.
All right, another question. The initial slide that you showed, Brett, showed an overhead.
Slide 2 or so.
This one?
That right there. The discrepancy with this is that's outdated. In front of that blue line at the bottom of the slide, that's completely built out. That is all condominiums all the way through
Right.
Paynes Landing.
And I don't disagree with you at all. It's just our satellite imagery sometimes, depending on which view you want, is not the most update. To your point, sir, yes, this one here does show the full build out, but as you can see, the camera only gives certain angles for certain years. So I will acknowledge, and it's pretty good knowledge within our office that White Oak is essentially complete. So it is operating at full capacity. I'm sure y'all can attest to that as well. I'm sure Mr. Mike G is pretty pleased with that. So yes.
Yeah, I'm sure he's pleased with that as well. All right. I figured you were. I didn't see any complaints there. All right, Rhett, thank you very much. At this time, before anybody else speaks, hang on. Our job is to go to the applicant next, okay, before we get into that, and then we will address everybody else. Okay, so that's the manner that we operate, so we will do that. So if the applicant would like to step forward.
Hi, my name is Ashley Queen. So just one of the things I wanted to add to like what Red had said. So our plan would be in that house, there's a 1,600 square foot basement. So our plan would be to make the basement the business. So essentially it would be soundproof because it's a basement. And then there would be dog room. So each like dog or family of dogs would have their own separate dog room in there. And the plan is to essentially have the dogs come up from the basement into the garage, which would be turned in, half the garage would be turned into like a business office. And then just go out that there's a door on the side of the garage. Like you would have the entrance door to the garage, but then there's also one off to the side that leads directly into the dog run yard. So they would go straight up like from the basement out. So they would always be contained and never like a way to get out or anything like that.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Dog runs, how much time are we talking the dog runs? Are they essentially staying in
It's
the
just-
areas or just going out for like?
Yeah, so okay, so we don't even have like runs like you would think with the typical boarding business. It's one big yard. And then honestly, it just depends. So we're gonna also have an indoor play area in the basement. So it's one of those things we would probably let them out every 3 to 4 hours, but we're talking we'd probably be out there 10 to 15 minutes max. Like we're not staying out there. I had told Rhett, like, we don't want to hear them barking. Like, we're not coming in trying to cause a nuisance for anybody. Like, we are trying, our business and grow our family and all the things, but trying to help everybody else too. We don't want to hear them barking. We don't want to hear them going crazy. So it's one of those things we would have them come inside and things like that as well.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I got a question. Will there always be someone there, even when you
Within
go on a
reason
weekend for
of
dinner?
within reason of normal everyday life. So like it's gonna be in our home, but like so my husband and I would be the ones running our business. So like say if we have to go to an appointment or something like that, like we may not be there, but I would be more than willing. Obviously, like our business would be online and things like that. And if there's neighbors who like had concerns and wanted our phone number, I have no problem giving them our phone number. My parents also live just 5 minutes down the road, so it's like we have family and friends around too. So like we would have means of if something was happening or like a neighbor had concern or needed something, like people could reach out to us and we would have means of someone being there rather quickly.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, here's what I'm gonna try to figure out is who goes first, right? So, yeah, let's just start there. We'll start with you and we'll go from there. How's that?
Well, good evening.
State your name for me and all who you're representing too, please.
My name is Dennis McDonald, and I'm the president of the White Oak Village Condominium Association. And I have just a few brief remarks regarding the conditional use permit requested by the property located at 95 Acosta Drive. Just a few moments ago, I presented Charlie Perkins with a signed petition from over 100 of our condominium owners in White Oak, which abuts the property, along with a copy of the remarks I'm making here this evening. White Oak Village is Scott County's only 55-plus senior citizen community. More than half of the condo owners in White Oak are older than 70 years old, myself included. We moved to the village because it is a quiet and safe community that brings with it a desired and peaceful quality of life as we age into the last years of our lives. A typical day in our neighborhood will see senior neighbors walking about the quiet neighborhood, and our mission as a board is to provide a great living experience for all the senior citizens who call White Oak Village their home. Today, the tranquility and quality of life that was the reason to purchase our condos is being threatened by this new business right next to us. This will alter the character of the White Oak Village community. We're finding it is already disrupting those condominiums situated along the properties of the old failing farm fence that has not been maintained by prior owners, but it is the only separation between our condominiums and what may be up to 30 dogs being boarded at this adjacent property. My condo is one of those along the fence row, and the driveway leading into and out of this dog boarding business. My neighbors and I have already observed an increase in traffic going in and out of the property, and they're not yet doing business, so what can we expect when they are? The crunch of the gravel driveway as vehicles go in and out is a sound that we've not had to deal with until now. When darkness falls, we are having to contend with bright vehicle headlights shining through our windows when they're exiting after dark. In fact, we are being awakened or disrupted by bright headlights of vehicles exiting the 95 La Costa property between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning and while sitting in our living room at night. This is not the tranquil quality of life I and the others who call White Oak Village home have enjoyed. These disruptions will only increase as customers start going in and out. For many, if not most of us who live in the village, this is the last home we will know. Approximately 40% of our condo owners are over 80 years of age. For the sake of the senior citizens and elderly residents of White Oak Village, we're asking the Board of Adjustments to take these facts into consideration when making your decision today, and please let us continue to enjoy the peace and quiet of our senior community as we live out the remainder of our lives.
Thank you.
Troublemaker number 2. Chris Fitzpatrick, you have my handout and a couple of articles along with that. Resident of White Oak Village, my background, I have a degree in environmental science. I was a county health department inspector for a number of years, and then an environmental attorney for about 35 years. Dennis, our association president, emphasized the tranquility and quality of life that were reasons that we bought our homes. Talked about the noise from the cars, the light pollution. Now we realize that you've heard many times from concerned neighbors when someone proposes to change their use to a more intensive one. In fact, as recently as a few minutes ago, you've heard this. So we know you're aware that neighbors can have difficulties here. In contrast, instead of one neighbor impacted, an entire subdivision is going to be impacted. Instead of up to 6 animals potentially, we've got 30 dogs. So this is a much more intensive situation. This proposed kennel will be in a private home designed to be a residence and not a facility for housing dozens of animals. It's not remotely compatible with the existing land use in the area. Studies show that noise levels in dog kennels regularly exceed 100 decibels. And I cite the study in the articles that I've given you. Just to put 100 decibels in context, a passing motorcycle averages 95 decibels. A chainsaw is 110 decibels. So this is not a small level of sound. While the applicant proposes to keep the animals in the basement, which itself should raise serious concerns about dog health, waste handling, and therefore human health, without soundproofing, there's no way to ensure that the noise level impacting nearby homes would drop to the 55 decibels more appropriate in a residential community at night. And that's in the study that I've provided you a copy of. Regarding traffic noise, the proposed change in land use will be from virtually no traffic noise coming from that property to what's likely to be a pretty steady stream of cars and trucks crunching up and down that gravel driveway that we've already heard about. The kennel obviously can't operate without ingress and egress, so that driveway is an area, quote, used in whole or in part for a commercial kennel, close quote. That quote's from Guideline A in the staff report. I'm sure you recognize it. Under Guideline A, that driveway area that will be used in whole or in part for a commercial kennel shall be a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines. This one, the edge, is 16 feet away from the property line. The traffic noise will spill right off the property into our homes. And without a high enough privacy fence, the light will spill off the property into our houses too. And those impacts will have a negative impact on our property values. You'll hear more about the fence from the next speaker. Property value decrease isn't speculative. Just last year, one day after a county board in California approved a CUP allowing a dog kennel in a residential zone, a house down the street from it had an offer reduction of $180,000 after the buyer found out the permit had been approved. And the source for that is in the materials. I expect you're also aware that light pollution has specific adverse effects on human health. I've given you an article on that as well. Light coming in our windows when we need sleep disrupts our circadian rhythm, our day-night balance, our biological clock. That light suppresses melatonin production, and there are negative effects on our immune system. This is well established, and again, the article is before you. Regarding property values, just intuitively, a buyer is going to know that a commercial operation like a dog kennel right across the fence from a quiet residential neighborhood is going to impact their quality of life, and that's going to decrease the amount the buyer is willing to pay. I don't have an appraisal to put before you, but any other conclusion would simply defy common sense, and I think we're all aware of that. To wrap up, the staff report indicates on page 3 that, quote, approval of this application would not adversely affect public health, safety, or welfare, or alter the character of the general vicinity, close quote. With respect, modifying a private home to be a boarding kennel for dozens of dogs with cars and trucks going in and out on a gravel driveway just a few feet from the property line does not allow the conclusion that there won't be adverse impacts or that the general vicinity won't be altered. This change in land use would have a huge adverse impact on our lives, our peace, our quiet, our sleep, and the value of our homes. We respectfully suggest that this application should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Jane is next.
Good evening. My name is Mary Jane Thurber. I'm a current resident in the White Oak community, living on Evergreen Path. I chose a 55 and plus community for many reasons, with safety and quiet being among the top. After much research, the White Oak community fit the criteria. I have a degree from Georgia Military College with 10 years experience in the animal care industry, to include owning my own pet sitting business within Columbia County, Georgia from 1998 to 2020 with 250 clients. I had no escapes. I have assisted the Georgia Emergency Management Agency in Columbia County, Georgia with the pet emergency evacuation planning, setup, and transportation. I also have training and knowledge from the University of Auburn in canine and feline behavioral sciences, and I want to address my concerns to you about the safety of our residents with the inclusion of the kennel into our neighborhood. Number one, the height of the privacy fence needs to be at least 7 foot, constructed of strong materials, and needs to be unpenetratable from top, side, bottom, and around. Many breeds, according to the American Kennel Club, that are able and agile enough to escape a 6-foot fence, but not limited to, include German Shepherd, Belgian Malinois, Jack Russell Terriers, Australian Shepherds, and many other favorite breeds, such as the Golden Doodle, of which this area has many. You might say that no dog can jump over a 6-foot fence, yet we've all seen those videos of the dogs exploiting their athletic abilities. The American Kennel Club says that most dogs can jump several times their own height. Dogs can be used to climb fences by kicking them up and over. Dogs are at a heightened sense of stress during grooming, daycare, and boarding, with increase in anxiety and fear issues. Common reasons that dogs escape is social isolation, separation anxiety, and also the reproductive drive and fear. Also, there are transmitting of diseases from dogs to human, known as zoonotic, such as rabies, which is fatal but preventable, and Pasteurella, transmittable through feces, contact with an infected dog, to include dog bites and other contaminated items. We are asking that the conditions of approval for this permit to include a 7-foot unbreachable fence, up, down, and around, that goes at least 6 feet under the dirt to ensure the protecting of the surrounding areas of residential properties.
6 inches?
6 inches underground?
Yes.
Ma'am, you have a very impressive background, and you had me until you said University of Auburn.
My name is Laverne McKinney, and I live in White Oak Village. I would like to draw your attention to the southern boundary there with that nice line of pine trees. That purported tree line, intended to protect us from the La Costa operation, does not exactly exist. The tree line is composed of shallowly rooted pine trees. 6 of those trees adjacent to our properties have been destroyed by wind in the last 2 years. There are significant gaps, 30 to 40 feet in that tree line already, and more can be expected in the future. As a matter of fact, there are 2 that are currently leaning, one of them extremely dangerous. I would again ask you to look at that map. My property is the first property that doesn't show up there on the unbuilt area. That's where many of the trees have fallen. In 2019, I purchased a 2,200 square foot house on a quarter acre in San Antonio, Texas. The house is in an upper middle class neighborhood, zoned completely residential, backing up to a green belt, and it was a loop, so that there was a 1-mile loop. Only thing in there were residences. In 2022, the house next door to me became available for new occupants, and 3 young women and 2 dogs moved in. Shortly thereafter, they opened a dog boarding, dog training business on that property. Needless to say, it was awful. There were groups of 10 to 15 people training their dogs on the streets and sidewalks. Street parking became a nightmare. There were children and adults and dogs in my front yard, trespassing, playing, standing in the shade in my yard, letting their animals poop in my yard and leaving it there. Dogs barking,
traffic, parking issues, shouting children, nervous parents, nervous dog owners. It was chaos. I complained to the city officials. An inspector came by the property one morning, drove by, saw no activity, and closed the case. Of course, there was no class in session at the time the inspector came by. I appealed the case. I showed them pictures and videos from my Ring camera of all the activity on and around my property. An inspector came back and talked to one of the occupants. She denied conducting either type of business from their home. The case was closed again. Lesson learned. If they get in, it's impossible to get them out or control their activity and their impact on the community. I could definitely see the handwriting on the wall. Within 6 weeks, I sold that property and moved to White Oak Village. An ideal situation for a senior, I thought. Now I'm faced with a very similar situation. Been there, done that, not fun. If this conditional permit is going to be granted, I'm begging that the city and county officials please protect our community. And I would like to add a personal note. I'm in my 85th year. I wake up in the morning at 3 or 4 o'clock and I feel the uncertainty of my heartbeat. I check the rhythm with my Apple Watch and it reports no AFib. I can feel that my heart is trying to decide if it's time to stop altogether. And I am at peace with that. I look back and I see that my life has been a process of responding to a series of small or not so small injustices. The little man being stepped on and discarded. I find myself in the midst of an injustice now. The La Costa property has not been a working agricultural property for many, many years. The Bevins farms and the other farms that have been converted and zoned residential. And residential they are, that's all. The closest commercial activity is at least 1 mile away on the bypass, which is an appropriate place for a commercial endeavor. The proposed use of the La Costa Drive property will affect hundreds of people from the many adjacent neighborhoods for a long, long time. What's next for this conditional use permit? Chicken slaughterhouses? Dog breeding barns? Leather tanning? What? This conditional use permit may be a done deal, but by rights, it should not be approved at all. These are residential neighborhoods, not commercial neighborhoods, period. Now, I can only look for a hero. Iconic John Wayne is dead. Audie Murphy is dead. My Uncle Charlie Walters is dead. All heroes. Where will we find our heroes? Do we have any heroes here? Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Chairman, before we go on, I need to note on the record, I represented Miss McKinney when she bought her property too. We've never talked about this application, but I did represent her in this.
Welcome to small town Scott County.
I'll try to take off more.
Well, Mr. Chairman and board members, you've got my remarks before you, so I'm not going to read from my prepared statement. But I hope you realize that the old folks here kind of have their act together. So I'm coming before you to request that you deny this application and vote against its approval. The area residents speaking tonight, attending tonight, many of those who could not appear here tonight just simply disagree with your staff. It's got 4 points that I'd like to make. Could you put your PowerPoint back to your findings? And I could have had a spine-tingling PowerPoint for you, but I didn't know this was available.
Did you think in particular?
That one thing that we talked about a minute ago, your findings that it didn't affect or adversely impact. That's it right there, the last bullet point on the PowerPoint. So I'm going to take them one at a time. The public health impact, barking dog complaints in subdivisions or densely populated areas is one of the most common and documented police calls that you're going to find. A neighboring barking dog causes stress, anxiety to other residents, as well as encouraging other dogs in the vicinity to bark. Approval of this application does impact the health and welfare of all residents, especially elderly and disabled. Number 2, altering the character of the general vicinity. Allowing up to 30 dogs in a confined area and in a densely populated residential area encourages neighboring dogs in the vicinity to bark, as well as dogs being walked through adjoining neighborhoods. The domino effect of barking is a nuisance to everyone. Approval of this application does alter the character of the general vicinity. Number 3, agricultural zoning. I understand what was said. However, the board staff states, respectively, it has a long-standing history of agricultural use. In fact, this 5 acres was separated from a farm as a residence, although under the jurisdiction of the county, it is still a residence in most of Georgetown. The timeline of the purchase of this property and this application questions the buyer's intent to purchase 95 La Costa Drive as a residence to later start a home occupation, but rather move an existing boarding and grooming business from 506 Dudley Avenue to 95 La Costa Drive. This home occupation is not a simple home office where business is conducted, but rather an indoor and outdoor business that should require much more scrutiny. Lastly, approval of the application itself. If the board chooses not to deny the application, I request the board postpone approval of this application for further staff inspections and community review. The basement, proposed dog runs, and property line conditions of the residents are not yet ready for operation. As such, approval of a conditional use permit should at least pause until the indoor and outdoor conditions are completed and inspected, and the community has time to verify any environmental impact from the current residential septic system, stormwater runoff to Elkhorn Creek, as well as the traffic impacts on the entire residential community. And I'm welcome to any questions. My major concerns are I see no timelines whatsoever laid out on when these things have to occur, when they are inspected, and when they have to be in place.
Thank you. I'm going to do something a little bit different this evening. I've done it before, but I think the overall theme we understand, right? I know there are a lot of people who are passionate about this, as well as the applicant is passionate about this. But I don't want to belabor something that we've already went through, right? I don't think that's fair to anybody. We've got a lot of folks here that are passionate, first of all, to staff. I think staff, as you know, is bound by certain regulations. You'll see approval come up for a lot of things because they're bound by KRS statutes. So staff did exactly what staff was supposed to do, right? So I applaud staff for standing behind that. I always will. They've been stuck with me now for a while. So staff did exactly what they were supposed to do. I applaud the applicant for wanting to do a business. I think more businesses in Scott County are needed. I'm a business owner myself. I think that's wonderful. However, it is the board's decision to make sure that the business fits within the area that we have to operate in. Saying that, I don't believe this one does. I believe there's other places that it probably would fit better. I'm gonna recommend and make a motion that we deny application S-2025-11 based upon the impact of the surrounding community.
I second.
That comes with a second from Mr. Cooper. Any questions or comments?
If I might suggest, Mr. Chairman, in addition to what you're saying, and I may ask you to repeat it so I can get it correctly, but I would also put on that, not just the impacts, but that you are not able to make sufficient safeguards and conditions
Agreed.
to protect the existing neighborhood from the impacts.
Agreed.
Yes.
Chairman Dillon, if staff may make one other recommendation
Please.
prior to making that motion. It may be beneficial to ask the audience if anyone here would like to speak in support of the application.
That's a fair question, and I agree with that. Is there anybody here that would like to speak in support of the applicant, or the application, excuse me, not the applicant, the application?
Can I have the chance to like speak one more time?
Yes, yes, ma'am, absolutely.
So I will say, like, I'm aware of the things that, the negatives that this can cause. But we are also willing to do anything and everything. Like, we had already talked to Rhett about putting up a privacy fence all the way down so the White Oak isn't affected by any of that. If it came down to paving our driveway the rest of the way so there's not gravel noise, like, we're willing to do that. We said, you know, we would put in additional trees in the back. I don't see how, like, I understand dogs make noise, but there are 2 dogs, and I think Red had even said, one of our neighbors had said this, there are 2 dogs since we've been living there that are going crazy over in the neighborhood, and that are even driving us crazy. And so that's one of my things of, like, there's already noise, it's driving us crazy. Like, we wouldn't allow that to happen. As far as, like, someone said, housing the dogs in the basement. We've already talked to Sherry at Animal Control, kind of told her our plan, things that we were considering, and she was all for it. So, like, we've already kind of covered our bases and, like, talking to people. And I think the biggest thing is, like, the noise, and it's like we don't want that. We were gonna make sure, like, that is kind of as minimal as possible. I will even say we have 5 dogs ourselves, so, like, it's one of those things. Noise is gonna happen with dogs, but we wanted to do everything we possibly could to make sure everyone is kind of, yes, it's a business, but we don't want to come in and disrupt everyone's lives. So what's the best way that we can do that, and what can we do, whatever we need to do to make sure that, you know, we can do our business, but then everyone else kind of gets to live their life too and not be affected.
Thank you.
So, thanks.
My response to that, and I agree with that, by the way. I don't think this young lady or the young man that's sitting there has any ill intent in this at all. So you guys all live in the same neighborhood, and they happen to live right behind you, right, or somewhere in that vicinity. However, I will say, I do agree with Charlie in the naming of the motion. I still make the motion that we deny application S-2025-11 based upon the facts that we cannot make enough safeguards to protect the community surrounding and the surrounding community. And I don't feel that this is a good fit for the community application as a whole. I will say, if that chooses and you want to go visit your neighbors and figure out a way forward, that's probably a good idea. You can always do that again, should you want to do that. But my motion for denial stands. Tommy, do you still second that denial?
Yes.
Tommy Cooper still seconds the denial. Any questions or comments? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same. There are none. Motion carries. Yeah. That's fair. Right. All right, we've still got some business to take care of. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back.
We're awful extravagant with your breaks.
We have the election of officers.
I forgot Ms. Holland was here and just accused. I mean, I don't know that we've received any self-nominations or anything of that nature, or.
Nobody wants it.
And I don't know if Rachel has any vested interest.
If I might suggest, we've had this situation before where people were rotating off about the time we were supposed to be electing. And we've kind of found that the best thing to do is not to elect while we've got only a partial board. So if Darren's gone after this month, then we'll have one there. We don't have Rachel here. So perhaps
And
if
she's
we.
not gonna be
She's not
here
here
next month.
either, though,
Well, and
and we have no chair.
Yeah, she's vice.
Well, that's easily done, because if we come to a meeting and we have no chair and we have no vice chair, then we have a decision among you to just designate someone to chair for that one meeting. But it's just, now that, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't do it. I'm just suggesting we've not done that in the past because we didn't get basically a good representation. We didn't get a lot of people considered. We're gonna have a vacancy, we're gonna have an absence. I mean, that's just not a great, board to choose from. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean you can't elect somebody that's not here tonight, too.
Can we postpone April meeting,
Postpone the meeting?
the April meeting?
I mean, holding your chair squeak. What's going on? What are you thinking?
When will we fill his vacancy, though? If he's talking about a full board for elections, when will we?
Yeah,
fill that vacancy?
to be honest, when I heard that, obviously we're gonna be down a member, we know we're probably gonna be short one for absence. I mean, quorum concerns are a thing. I don't know if preemptively postponing is
Well,
appropriate.
you can certainly do that. Set it for a special meeting. We just had to give special notice. I mean, we can certainly do that for the following week.
I'd have to even check the submittals of what we had. I'm sure we've had some, but
Get long enough.
what were your thoughts?
Meetings, we could do the
My,
next week,
my
which is
very
that.
limited thoughts on the situation is I'm looking at 3 people who will still be on the board. That's enough for quorum. Move forward. We don't want to slow down the work of the board. It is, as Charlie pointed out, totally possible to appoint a board for a meeting specifically in the event that both chair and co-chair or vice chair are not present. I would just, again, take into consideration whenever it is appropriate to nominate people who can consistently be there. That's
Well-
important.
If Janet, I guess, would have the input, I mean, I would be willing to step back in, but I've talked to Tommy, and I would need a consistent vice chair, because I really take this serious. I've missed like 3 times in 11 years. I mean, I'm going to be here, but I'm
And we're
going
gonna
to
write you up for it, too. You just wait for it.
But, and so Tommy has voiced that he would be willing to be vice chair, and then I would at least feel like I had a fallback. No, I mean, I love Rachel, but she's just otherwise occupied at a large amount of time. And I wouldn't want to be the only chair. You know how that feels. I felt in the first month that y'all were chair and vice chair.
If that suits, and I frankly imagine that it does, then we can go ahead and have a motion tonight to make those appointments.
Now, that being said, if we get somebody to take his place and we really like them, can I like
Well,
just quit and let them take over?
if that happens, you can pressure the sucker and
Okay.
resign.
Amen to that.
Okay.
But no, seriously,
sucker.
if that's an arrangement that's suitable, you still have a vote. I mean, it's not like you're gone. So, motion second to elect those 2. Motions then cease if there aren't any competing interests. And then we take it by acclamation and we're done for the night.
I won't make the motion, but I'll second it if you want.
Or you can do it, Janet. I'm begging you to do it if you want to take it.
No, I've got too much going on.
Now,
No, I can't.
since I didn't catch it the first time, chair, vice chair, or chair, vice chair?
No, I don't want chair yet.
Okay, so chair, vice chair.
Yes.
And that's your motion, Darren?
No, I said I won't make the motion. I'll
I'll make
second
that
it.
motion. I'll make it.
Yes,
I'll make
ma'am,
that
thank
motion.
you.
All right, so I'll second that motion. Oh, that's still mine. All right, any questions, comments? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed by the same? There are none, motion carries.
All right.
Now,
Last matter.
about next month's meeting, if there's anything contentious, like tonight, then we can move it to a different night, right, where Rachel can be here.
That is correct.
So that's what we may have to keep in mind and look at. Do you have any idea what's going to be on the agenda next month?
Not right now.
Just out of my mind at all. Nothing like this.
No
And we-
dogs, as
and
far
we
as
might-
I'm aware.
And we might notify the judge that we do have kind of a special situation. We have a person who can't be here, we have a vacancy, and if there's any way to, you know, kind of poke the process a little bit.
He was poked tonight. He was told tonight.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And frankly, I'm sure he's gonna get right on it, because he's been good at that sort of thing, so.
So with no other things going on, I would just like to thank our past chairman, Mr. Darren Dillo, for your 8 years of service to this board. Obviously, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, and you've really been a testament, both yourself and your community that you've served. So with that, we don't have a certificate, but I've got a firm handshake waiting on you here in a
That
little
sounds
bit.
good. Well, here's what I want
I've
to
got
do.
your certificate, it's a due pile, we'll have it by next year
Thank you.
sometime.
Here's what I want to do. So this ends the Scott County Board of Adjustments, is that correct? Done. I'm out.
Excellent.